guys. It's a pleasure to be here today. I hope I can present some information that will be interesting and inspirational and encourage everyone to sample the substance eventually, if not already. My personal, I'll try to make this quick. In Years ago in college, I had my first experiences with psychedelics, which were very positive. But after college, I had no source for most drugs, including psychedelics, and there was a long interim where I didn't really I wasn't really involved with drugs at all, except an occasional joint here and there. But in 2014, when I was on a ski trip in Colorado with one of my kids, he offered me a tab of LSD one morning, and we spent the day in a profoundly affected state, which was just phenomenal. And because he was in college at the time, he had access to all kinds of stuff. So I I started again using a variety of things, including psychedelics, and I didn't really know the best way to utilize them at the time. It took a few years before I really got clued in. I read Jim Fadiman's book. I started to go on some journeys inside, which I found to be very different and very rewarding. Somewhere along the line, I acquired some 2C-B, which was before the pandemic. It was probably around 2018-19. I had heard about it. I didn't know anybody that had experience with it, but I got some. I tried it. I experimented with it and found that it's just a phenomenal substance. So I've been using it in a wide variety of settings, in a wide variety of dosages since then, and I thought I'd like to share some of what I've experienced and learned. So my talk today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history. The history is something you can all look up online. It's nothing too special, or it's nothing that I'm going to go into great detail about. There's also, I'm going to talk a little bit about the cognitive effects, the physical effects, dosing, uh, some of the things that I've found that combine really well with it in my experience. So I should say I tend to be a little opinionated, and in spite of that, I am very open to a lot of different perspectives and opinions. Um, but if I were to say during my presentation, make some definitive kind of statements about the way things are, you should all know that um, I realize these are all just opinions that I have generated because of my own experience, and I don't expect them to translate across everybody's experience. So, 2CB is a phenethylamine. It was synthesized in 1974 by Sasha Shulgin. It was initially used in the psychiatric community as a therapeutic aid because it helped to cultivate a warm, empathic bond between the therapist and the patient and tended to dissolve ego defenses. And it was repeatedly referred by Sasha and Anne as one of, if not their favorite substances. Uh, so there's this common kind of quote by Sasha that I could not find an actual source for, but it seems to be in the culture that Sasha stated it's one of the most graceful, erotic, sensual, introspective compounds that he ever created, of which there are over 200. And for most people, it's a short-lived and comfortable psychedelic with neither toxic side effects or next-day hangover. So Sasha and Ann had this favorite magical six, or whatever it was they called it. There was six things that they found were like really good. Uh, One of them was mescaline. The other one was a substance called DOM that he created, which, if anybody's experienced it, I'd be interested to know. It is and the other four were 2C products, of which 2CB seems to be the most prominent and popular. Um, DOM is also a phenethylamine, and it's extremely long acting. Sasha really liked it. There's a really interesting account by Andrew Weil that he gave at the Psychedelic Science 2003 symposium that you can look up. That is worth checking out. He had a relationship with Sasha and described Sasha would send him stuff to try one of which was DOM, and he wasn't really too thrilled about it because, it's like 20 hours. But finally, Sasha convinced him to give it a shot, which he did. He describes what happened and told Sasha he would never do it again. So it's kind of cool. Um, Sasha Anand said that all of these substances have a unique combination of clarity, depth, and emotional resonance that set them apart from the hundreds of other things that he synthesized and tested. And they represent the most spiritual and therapeutically valuable of their discoveries. They were tools for self-exploration and personal transformation. That was quoted by Anne in an interview that she gave. So eventually, in the early '90s, it was then manufactured and packaged in tablets of 5 to 10 milligrams by Dritwell Pharmaceuticals, and it was called Nexus. It was sold in head shops, sex positive stores, nightclubs, and as an aphrodisiac or sexual enhancement for diminished libido. So, just kind of an interesting caveat. Um, Now, Anne Shulgin, she was quoted as saying that it was never meant to be a party drug. 2CB is a beautiful material when used with intention, but its commercialization took it far from the setting it deserved. Maybe she was referring to the commercialization of in the sale of Nexus. I'm not really sure. It's my opinion that it's a phenomenal substance for a party setting. Uh, According to my son, it's used quite commonly at festivals and at burns. And I think the reason is that it really enhances musical appreciation and it's somewhat stimulating. So as opposed to, smoking weed and getting kind of like settled down and lethargic, the combination of musical enhancement and being a little stimulating is just perfect. Um, you might like my wife and I really enjoy music. If we go to a cafe where there's an acoustic set going on, we might use a very low dose of 2CB. I had some friends visit recently, one of which is in this group, who we dosed ourselves with 2CB with a moderate dose, which I went to dosage later, but we went to a ZZ Top concert at a local venue, and it's like a pretty heavy duty rock show. It was it was like a phenomenal combination of music, a show, and a slight boost with MDMA. Not MDMA, 2CB. It Because of its slight stimulating property, you do feel like you kind of want to get up and participate at a modest dose. Um, so I kind of throw that out there. In 1985, MDMA was placed into Schedule One, and then 2CB for probably a short period of time, it rose as an alternative to MDMA. But most users found that its effects were more introspective and less socially lubricating than MDMA, and people's experience varied dramatically because of the difficulty in dosing. People have very different tolerances for 2CB, much different than, let's say, MDMA or mushrooms, in my opinion. So it's very difficult for somebody to come into a therapeutic environment and for a practitioner to give them a dose and have a reliable response. It's very challenging. So I don't think that lasted for very long. And then on June 2nd, 1995, the DA placed 2CB into Schedule 1. So then it obviously went underground. Uh, it, Everybody should be aware of some resources for some of this information. Laura Top does a really good kind of informational thing on double blind about 2CB. It's about a 20-minute thing. Some of what I've assimilated for this talk comes from her presentation, so I got to credit her. Not everything she says I agree with, but mostly I do. There's also a website called Psychonaut Wiki that everybody should know about because it's kind of like Wikipedia for drugs and drug users. There's just a tremendous amount of information on everything that you can think of. And some of this next information is coming from Psychonaut Wiki. They describe various effects that are categorized in different ways, like physical effects and cognitive effects and some other effects. So I kind of going through there, picked out a few things that I think are interesting from my perspective and that I have some opinions on that I'd like to share. Um, so in terms of physical effects, what Psychonaut Wiki describes are that in terms of body sensations, that the body high of 2CB is reported to be one of the most complex among psychedelics, exhibiting aspects of MDMA, 2CE, and LSD. Um, I'm not really sure what that means, but I'll share that anyway. It's really unique. Maybe it's more like MDMA than most other psychedelics, but it's not like MDMA. Uh, they say that it's first characterized by an intense, soft, warm glow that grows over the body and is capable of becoming highly euphoric. This I can kind of agree with. This is a wonderful effect. It's hard not to like it, and it's something I have experienced many, many times. Um, I should probably also say that, I kind of qualified or described this talk as mini and macro dosing of 2CB. I should say that historically I have not been too interested in microdosing. If microdosing is kind of considered sub-perceptual dosing, that's not really something I've ever been too interested in. It maybe has an effect for some people. I am more interested in dosing to the point where I feel something shift. And so that's why I'm referring to mini dosing and macro dosing. Um, so uh, 2CB is a bit stimulating. Not a lot, but it is a little bit. And um, so when I'm tripping on 2CB, it's different than mushrooms or LSD. On mushrooms or LSD, I can be tripping and I can be in a place and I can be like completely motionless for a long period of time, for hours sometimes. If I'm tripping on 2CB, I'm good for a period of time, and then like for a period of time, meaning maybe an hour, and then I feel like, okay, I gotta change something. I gotta change my setting. I gotta change the music. Um, I have to shift in some way. So that's different and something you might want to be aware of. It's fine. It's just a little different. Um, there's also mention of body control enhancement. So some of these substances that are more stimulating really do enhance a feeling of the body being engaged and the ability to move your body and control your physical actions is enhanced. Um, my experience, in my opinion, is that there's nothing more effective for that than LSD. LSD is the absolute king in my world for that kind of influence. Um, and if you look online, if you Google psychedelics in extreme sports, you will find that it is very common for the extreme sports community to be utilizing psychedelics. They're utilizing predominantly, as far as I can tell, psilocybin-containing mushrooms and LSD. And for me, there's just no comparison between the two. LSD is far superior, in my opinion. There's no influence on its effect by what you have in your stomach. You often don't know the potency of the mushrooms. The effects of the mushrooms don't last as long. LSD you can take. It doesn't matter what you have eaten. Uh, the consistency is definite. the effects last the entire day, and it is um, it's just what Wikipedia said, or what ChatGPT said, is that among extreme sports and athletic endeavors, it's an enhancer of physical skills. It enhances focus, flow states. It improves balance and coordination, reduces anxiety, stress, and the perception of pain. It boosts creativity and problem-solving skills. So if you are an athlete that is, functioning at a high level and you've developed the skills, uh, when you supplement with the appropriate dose and the appropriate psychedelic, you are functioning on another level that is thrilling and engaging, and it's really remarkable. So I enjoy skiing, and I play some golf. It's no question in my mind, after many experiences, that I can ski at a more advanced level, with less physical fatigue, with more enjoyment, with more focus, in a flow state that is not accessible without that supplement. And I can play golf better when I'm microdosing on LSD. It's just, it is what it is, in my opinion, in my experience. Um, and some of you may know this guy, this pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates, named Doc Ellis. Doc Ellis, on June 12th, 1970, he threw a no hitter. And just a little background: he was off that day. He wasn't going to be pitching, so he dropped a tab, just kind of chill. And then he called up. He got called up to pitch, and had to go in, and he pitched a no hitter. He was very in tune with what was going on the field. So that's just a little example to support my own opinion and experience. They also mentioned enhanced tactile, kind of sensation. I can't really say I experienced that or noticed that. Some people maybe have. We're going to have some time, hopefully, for some feedback and some questions and some comments. So I'm interested to know, like, some other perspectives and opinions. At a low dose, there's really no nausea involved with this substance, but on many substances, psychedelics, mushrooms, phenethylamines, there is a propensity or a possibility of it causing some gastric distress. Like I said, at a low dose, I don't see that happening. At a high dose, it can happen, and it's like I read FICAL, and Sasha and Anne were having these parties where people would come over and they would have dinner and then they would do drugs. And I wouldn't recommend doing a high dose 2C-B experience after eating a meal. It doesn't make sense. But apparently, from what I remember reading the book, that's kind of what they did. And so, in order to minimize the potential nausea of that kind of combination, what they found was that if they mixed the 2C-B in some juice, a glass of juice, and they drank it over a period of 20 or 30 minutes, they really didn't experience much, if any, nausea. So anyway, that's just a little interesting kind of point of interest. So next, there's some cognitive effects that are also kind of interesting. They're often described as both insightful and relatively normal in the thought processes that a person might have, even after moderate to high dosages. Um, and I agree with that. I've experienced that. It seems like a little differently than taking a significant dose of mushrooms or LSD. You can take a modest to significant dose of 2C-B, and you can go into that experience. And if you've really been kind of playing with an idea, or you've been trying to figure something out, or you've been writing and trying to articulate a theme that you're having some difficulty with or struggling with, you can take that into a 2C-B experience, and you can follow that and work with it and kind of come to some productive revolution much more easily than you can on some of these other substances. You know, if you take a decent dose of mushrooms or LSD and you have this intention that you want to explore, it's like, you know, it's unlikely you're going to be able to manage that. You know, you're at the liberty of your subconscious and what it has for you as opposed to what you want to have for yourself. So that's that's just maybe something else that's a little unique about 2CB. Um, so I should also mention that I am an introvert by nature, um, and some of the effects of 2CB I find to kind of ameliorate my tendencies towards introversion. Uh, I generally don't really have too much interest in getting together at a party and socializing with a whole bunch of people that I don't really know and I don't have anything in common with. It's a bit intimidating and a bit it's just not that interesting for me. uh, with friends, in a small group, I'm good. I find that very enjoyable. But on 2CB, that dynamic shifts considerably. If I'm, a little primed on a low dose of 2CB, am much more sociable. I find it somewhat enjoyable to be interacting in a social environment. I'm more interested in the other people that I might meet in a social environment than I would be otherwise. It's just more fun. So um, I throw that out there. I'm kind of interested in what the opposite end of the spectrum might experience. You know, people that are extremely extroverted, they may not find that to be useful or beneficial. And I don't know. I haven't had a chance to really talk to a lot of people who do have who utilize this substance. Um, it's part of what my interest is in here is connecting with other people who possibly have some experience from a different perspective. So So I think I maybe mentioned this earlier, but some of the other things that were mentioned by Psychonaut Wiki were this analysis enhancement. There's a tendency towards introspection when you're on 2CB. Um, so this isn't something that's going to occur in a social environment, at a party environment, at a concert kind of a thing. But if you sit with it in uh, in a place where you're alone in the context of a non-social setting, it does lend itself to an introspective kind of space. And uh, again, as I kind of mentioned earlier, it seems easier to hold on to and to be able to follow a thought process. And again, this is potentially or can be a booster for creativity and problem solving. Um, Jim Fadiman, as many of you know, probably he did some research before things became illegal with professionals who were working on projects, architects, scientists, engineers who were stuck, in their process of trying to develop whatever they were doing, and found that a modest dose of LSD was extremely conducive to finding resolution to those issues. And I think that 2CB is very likely to be helpful in that regard as well. Um, there's also reports of anxiety and paranoia. And while it's possible at most doses, this effect generally occurs at consistently lower intensity compared to classical psychedelics such as LSD and psilocybin mushrooms. I can't say that I've ever experienced anxiety and paranoia on 2CB. I think maybe if you take it to the extreme and you're like mega dosing, who knows what in the world's going to happen. But at modest doses, I don't think it's an issue. There are also reports of increased libido combined with the increased bodily sensations and stimulation 2CB is capable of making sexual activity extremely pleasurable. So that can be important for some people, and I will have more to say about that in a little bit. There is definitely increased musical appreciation. This is like for sure. I would say it is second only to MDMA as a concert drug. It's stimulating, engaging, encourages movement and musical appreciation. Um, we just as an aside, I don't know how much I should go into my personal stuff, but I'll do it anyway. This summer, my wife and I went to a concert at the Beacon Theater in Manhattan. One of our favorite artists. The first night we did MDMA. It was phenomenal. It was like great. Second night, you can't do MDMA 2 nights in a row. So the second night we did, like I did a pretty healthy dose of 2CB. I think I took 15 milligrams, and I gotta say, it was just as good. I was surprised. It was I hate to say this, but it was the first time that I took a really healthy dose of 2CB on its own at a concert with an artist that I really like. And I gotta say, I enjoyed it just as much as being on MDMA. So that was kind of new and pretty inspiring. How you guys doing? All right. So now I want to talk about dosage. What time is it?
Hey, Dan, we've got some questions in the chat about what you're saying is a low dose, a medium dose, and a high dose. Maybe you
Right.
could give us some milligram quantities on those to clear that up.
All right, I will do that because we're going to talk about dosage right now. And this is challenging uh, because I will answer that question. There's likely to be more variability in the response to a dose of 2CB than most psychedelics, but it can be managed with marked specificity. And what is, I think, a little unique about 2CB is that I experienced considerable variability in the character of the experience depending on the dose and the setting than other psychedelics. So if you take MDMA, for instance, the influence of MDMA is pretty much the same. You might need more or less of a dose to get there, but once you get there, it's the same, in my opinion. But 2CB, there seems to be a considerable variety of the type of experience that you achieve through different dose. So what I would encourage people to do if they're going to experiment is start at a low dose in a certain setting. And then within that same setting to change the dose to see how it affects how you feel in that setting. Before you go on to an entirely different scenario and setting and kind of start over again. Because I think it's very easy to overshoot your dosage in a specific setting in an environment, and if you do that, it's not a good experience. Whereas if it's the appropriate dose, it can be a phenomenal experience. So my suggestion is you start slow and you work up.
May I ask a question
Sure.
about that? So you're saying start with a low dose in a specific setting. Are you saying during a different session, then have the same setting and increase dose, or at that very same session, increasing the dose?
Next time in the same setting,
Okay.
ramp it up if you want. Yeah. So to give you an idea about how variable people's response is to a specific dose, like my wife and I enjoy combining cannabis with 2CB. And I'll maybe have a chance to describe a little bit more of that. But my wife, if she's taking a gummy, which we like to do, she can take, like if she takes 2 milligrams of 2CB, it's good. It enhances the experience in a way. If she takes 3 milligrams, it's not good. Okay, that's the difference. And so you have to be careful. And it's not good in that with a 5 milligram gummy and 2 milligrams of 2CB, she's chilled. She's on the couch, music, on a trip. She trips on cannabis. But if she takes 3 milligrams instead of 2, it's like she can't stay in that space and go on that trip. She's like up, about, you know, out on the porch, on the couch, in the other room. It creates a restlessness that completely negates the kind of experience that she enjoys. Um, and my wife is generally sensitive to these substances, whatever they are, uh, far more than I am. I'm I have a hard time even believing that somebody can take 2 milligrams of 2CB and have it influence them in any way. 5 years ago, I would have laughed at that. I would have been like, that's placebo effect. But now I know it's actually a real effect. She's just very sensitive to the substance, and I'm not. So she might take 2 milligrams. I might take 6 or 7 or 8 milligrams. So that also brings up the substance of how you dose in such small amounts. 2CB usually comes in a powder. Hopefully, it's a powder, not a pill, because if it's a pill, you don't really know what's in it. But if you can get powdered 2CB from a reputable source, that's probably the best way to do this. So, does anybody know how you might be able to dose in such small, accurate, uh, kind of with that specificity? Anybody have an idea?
Well, certainly a good scale.
You'd have to have a $5,000 scale.
In liquid, you dissolve it and something like that?
You got it. You got it. I got a bottle here somewhere. You see the bottle? Okay. So what we do is we take, like, keep it simple. You can weigh out 200 milligrams of 2CB. Everybody has a scale. If they have a scale, you can measure out 200 milligrams of anything, and then you put it into. Can everybody see that right there? It's I think it's probably like a 500 milligram dropper bottle, and you add 200 drops of vodka or some kind of alcohol to it. So you have, in effect, you have 1 milligram of 2CB in one drop that comes out of this bottle. So then you can dose with great specificity. You can use 1 milligram or 2 milligrams or 3 milligrams. You can carry it with you, like play around with it and experiment with, pretty accurately. One other thing in this category where it's just discussed. Does that help in terms of dosage?
Yeah, what is the liquid that you're putting it in?
I use vodka.
Vodka. And how stable is it over time in vodka?
It seems to be very stable. I've never had a problem with it. I think it would probably be water dissolvable as well, water soluble as well. Sometimes it takes a long time to go through a couple hundred milligrams, so I feel it's likely to be more stable in alcohol than water.
And that
My
color
only
is
theory on water, my theory on water, David, would be something like it would get skunky over time, maybe. But if you use really clean water and really clean jars, like I like distilled water, you're probably doing okay. But I think vodka would make it last a little longer.
Yeah, I do the same thing with LSD. If I have a 125 milligram tab of LSD, I put in 125 drops of water, and if it takes me 2 or 3 or 4 months to use whatever I have, it's never. Did I say water? Okay, not water, alcohol, because it's going to tend to preserve the material more reliably than water. Any other questions about dose?
And the other question is, can you take us through like mini and macro dosing? Like what milligrams are you talking about?
Yeah. All right. Like if I'm going to go out for a social event, maybe go eat with my friends or my family, and I want to feel a little more socially engaged, in a little better mood, I'd probably take 6 milligrams. My wife would take 2. If I take more than that, I find that I do not feel as good in that environment. So 5 or 6 milligrams. If I'm going to the museum, well, if I go to a museum, I'm usually taking LSD. If I'm going to go to ZZ Top, and I have to drive home, I'm probably taking, 10 or 12 milligrams. If I'm going to a rock and roll concert, I'm probably taking like 15 to 20 milligrams, depending on how, engaged and enthused I want to be at the event. um, yeah, and I would rather not. I would rather not. I definitely would not want to drive to the venue after taking 15 or 20 milligrams. But if I took it an hour ahead of time and I drove, I'd be fine. By the time the event is over, I'd be fine. My motor skills and my perception of what's going on, I don't think are compromised by uh, anything other than an extreme dose of 2CB.
And are you getting the personal growth insights you can get on like mushrooms or LSD? Is it that kind of medicine?
Ah, good question. I was going to get to that.
Okay, good.
But I can answer that now. I don't think my experience is that you're not going to be going as deep on a 2CB experiences as you will potentially on mushrooms or LSD. It's um, yeah. On the other hand, I do want to emphasize that this is a very powerful psychedelic, and like I mentioned on mushrooms, I can take a good dose of mushrooms, and I'm gone for a long period of time. On 2CB, you might be gone, but not as long, for an hour maybe. But it does, I feel that it does take you to this place where you are just separated by, like a ethereal membrane from something that is extremely powerful. And I have experienced some really profound, meaningful visions that had clear, important, metaphorical relevance that I will remember for the rest of my life. Let me say, I don't generally have visions, and I don't generally see stuff when I'm in a psychedelic, and when I'm on a psychedelic trip. It's only extremely rarely that I will have a vision, but I have had that occur when I'm using 2CB. At least as frequently as I've had that using mushrooms or LSD. And even though you might not feel like you are going as deep as on some other substances, I have had these epiphanies that just pop into the experience out of seemingly nowhere that are, really insightful. It is also the only substance that I have ever experienced a voice speaking to me, in a disembodied voice that is not coming seemingly from within myself, within my mind. It's like external. It's like I was in my living room listening to music, and the music stopped, and this voice had like a message for me. That's only happened once in my life, but that was on a 30 milligram dose of 2CB. So there is that. It's not none of this is consistently reliable, but it is available on occasion with I think any of these substances. Does that help? There also doesn't seem to be any side effects. Like this instance where I relayed my friends coming, taking 2CB, going to a concert, coming home. I think we dosed ourselves around 7 o'clock. We went to the concert. We did the concert. We came home at 11:30. Everybody was going to bed. Because we're old. We don't stay up that late anymore. you know, Everybody went to sleep. They had a great night. And so the effects are depending on how much you take. It might be 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. 6 hours is you're done. And So it's very easy. It's go ahead. Somebody had a question. Because of the versatility of this substance and there's no real seemingly consequence of symptomology or repercussion. It's just an extremely versatile, friendly, user-friendly substance. Um, there's no real feeling of being compromised mentally or physically. I have had some instances where I have been tripping on the front porch, and I'm like zonked out in the music, headphones on, and I have this feeling that there's somebody approaching, and I look up, and my neighbor from across the street is coming over. We have a relationship, and I'm like, oh my goodness, am I going to be able to manage this? So, he comes over, he sits down, we have a conversation, 20 minutes go by, he leaves. It was very manageable. You can come out of, it seems like you can come out of that experience a little more easily than otherwise. And you can engage in kind of a normal place, a normal way. And then you can kind of go back into it. 2CB is not, in my experience, as overwhelmingly, this overwhelmingly co-opt your ability to function as some of the other psychedelics. I also I accidentally dosed myself with 20 milligrams of 2CB last year when I was going to visit my parents at a resort in the Catskills. I thought I was dosing myself with LSD because it was it's in the Catskill Mountains. It was at this posh resort, and they have forest and landscaping and arboretums, and I was really thinking I was going to enjoy myself, and I dosed myself with 2CB instead, and I was like, oh my goodness, because that's a pretty big dose, and I was going to have to go there, and I was going to eat dinner with my parents, and I had my cousin and her niece there, and I was kind of worried, as you might imagine, but it actually was very manageable, and it was extremely pleasant, which I don't think would have been possible on mushrooms. I don't tend to try it on mushrooms, but it really worked out very well. Um, so there's also there's some combinations that I think I should mention that I found to be really really good, and one of them is combining 2CB with MDMA. This is called nexus flipping, probably from that original production of 2CB pills as a nexus. So there's this combination that is seemingly somewhat well known and common where you combine 2CB and MDMA, and my wife and I have tried mixing a few things with MDMA. We just we don't like adulterating the MDMA experience because it's so unique and it's so powerful and it's so wonderful that anything that we've tried to combine just kind of is a detriment to the experience. And I would say, with the exception of 2CB, so the way that I've used it and the way that I find it to be really nice is that about 4 hours after the MDMA experience, when I may just start to be feeling a little bit of resolution to the influence, I will take a dose of 2CB. And what I found is it considerably extends the come down of the MDMA experience. And it does that in a way that doesn't really negate or compromise the experience of the MDMA high. So that might be worth experimenting with. Um, and
Can I ask a kind of related question?
Sure.
You talked about you and your wife for a social event. She would take 2 milligrams, you would take 5 and 6. How soon would you know that you can dose again? So you took 5. Maybe it wasn't enough. Do you wait half an hour? Do you wait an hour? And then
Yeah.
if you dose again, is it very small increments that you're doing?
Well, the truth is I don't usually redose.
Okay.
Um, I kind of dose, leave it at that. And if it isn't quite right next time, I'll change it.
Mhm.
I should also say, which I don't think I have, that to come up on 2CB, for me, I might try to feel it, or I might start to feel it maybe 20 minutes after ingestion or 30 minutes after ingestion. If I take it, if I drop it in my mouth, not in juice, but I just take some drops in my mouth. But the full effect of that influence, I don't think really occurs for until about at least an hour after ingestion.
Great, thank you.
The other thing that comes to mind is that sometimes 2CB is kind of sold as LSD in various contexts, maybe at parties, at burns, at raves. So, and it's not as long lasting. It's a little different than LSD. So sometimes what people do when it starts to kind of fade is they redose. And I don't have any really hard evidence for this, but I've heard anecdotally that it's really not good to redose, like a significant amount of 2CB repeatedly. It may have some kind of negative consequence physiologically. So I don't know that. I don't do it, but it's good to be aware of that.
Yeah, Joe mentioned earlier in one of his comments in the chat that the dose response effect isn't linear. So there comes an inflection point at which the experience can get way more intense than what you would expect from just adding one or two more drops of your liquid.
Yeah. It's not linear. Like 12 milligrams is not just twice as much as 6. So you do have to be careful.
He used the word exponential.
Yeah.
Joe did.
Yeah. Yes. So the other thing I want to talk about is combining 2CB with cannabis. Laura Taub, in her presentation, she kind of warns about using them together, but I have found that is a fantastic synergy. It creates a fantastic synergy. They potentiate each other. So you want to, again, kind of start modestly. But, and one of the things that that combination is really, really good for is sex, which I'd like to talk about for a bit. I don't think anybody will be offended by my doing that. But, a few years ago, my wife and I, the same kid that turned me on to LSD, he brought home some infused chocolate from Colorado. he left it around the house, just disappeared. And unbeknownst to me, my wife kind of got into it and started to experiment. And then one day, as I recall, it might not be entirely accurate, but my recollection is, I came home from work one day and she said, honey, here, take some of this stuff. And in a little while, we're going to go upstairs and kind of get busy. So I was like, yeah, that's good by me. So we did that. We found out that sex on a gummy is like next level stuff. And we didn't really know. We had no context. We had no people to really bounce that off of. We wanted, maybe that's just us. But subsequently, we have discovered it's not just us. There are other people who have found that same effect. I had a patient in my practice who I, very gently mentioned this to, because I knew she was a user of gummies, and she was like, "Oh my goodness, that is for sure true." Next time I saw her, she brought in her favorite gummies, for sex. So there is a certain demographic who has discovered this, and it doesn't really seem to be very prominently discussed in the psychedelic community. So I'm kind of doing my part to spread the news. And most of the discussion of sex and psychedelics in this community is like in the context of kink and BDSM and LGBTQ and the queer community, which is all great. But then there's the rest of us who are married or have relationships. Might be heterosexual, who are having sex at home. Kind of routine stuff, not getting much attention. And I don't think that I've ever heard a conversation about regular people at home having sex with drugs. So until recently, we had the opportunity to have a little chat with Shelley and Charlie Wininger, who some of you may know. Charlie is an evangelist for MDMA therapy, and Shelley is an evangelist for utilization of cannabis gummies and sex, especially for women. She apparently teaches workshops for women to try to, educate them about the benefits of gummies and sex. She said in her this little conversation we had with her that if if you evaluated the quality of your sex experience on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you be? I suggested what? Okay, let me rephrase that. If you kind of quantified or qualified your sexual experience on a scale of 1 to 10 without drugs, it might be whatever it is. But with cannabis, and I said, it's got to be at 11 at least. And she said, no, it's at 22. That's an odd number, right? 22, why 22? But I think the gist of that comment was that sex on a gummy isn't really able to be quantified on a scale of 1 to 10. It's like so far off the scale, it's not that scale, that typical scale isn't really going to work for it. And cannabis, our experience is that on a gummy, after a couple of hours, our scenario is, we take a gummy, I take 2C-B with the gummy, we hang out, we listen to music for a couple of hours, and then eventually, we kind of engage in we get busy, and it allows us to focus on what is happening between us and what we're experiencing with the complete exclusion of anything else that might be a distraction. It's kind of like a bit of a flow state in the bedroom. And that leads to an incredible experience. So, it's a little bit like, I don't know anything about Tantra, but it's a little bit what I would imagine tantric sex to kind of involve. So, curious as I am, I went online. I thought maybe, these folks over in India who are practicing Tantra, they might be like smoking a little hash on the side, to get things going. And, and sure enough, I was told by ChatGPT that cannabis has been used by the Vedic practitioners of Tantra for since 700 AD, and that it's very common for yogis to utilize cannabis to kind of facilitate their meditative practices. So, obviously this is nothing new. I don't know if any of your yoga teachers have discussed this with you. Probably not. But you might want to ask next time you go to a yoga class. So anyway, what we found is that the sex it kind of slows down, and it becomes, like we feel like we're more in tune with what we're feeling and what our partner is feeling. And, there's this gradual buildup of sexual energy that culminates in these huge, long orgasms that, are like full body experiences. So I hope that's not too much information, but it's like there should be some more conversation about this in the community. And the only person that I've heard discuss it is Shelley Wininger. So she does teach workshops if anybody's interested in sponsoring. I told her, I'd love to come to one of them, and she said, that you can't. You're not a woman. So I'm not privy to her shtick, but
Daniel,
yeah.
first of all, not too much TMI. And how much do you take of the gummy and of this 2C-B? And do you have a favorite gummy brand you want to recommend?
I just take a 5 milligram gummy. My wife and I have never really developed a tolerance for 2C-B, so I might take 5 to 7.5 milligrams, and then I'll take about 6 milligrams of 2C-B. Now again, my wife, she will only take. My wife doesn't really need the 2C-B because she has such a different relationship with cannabis than I do. This brings up another good point, which I will try to remember to address right after your question. So my wife needs much less. If she takes more than 2 milligrams, again, she gets kind of restless. She loses that ability to really flow with it. I don't have that problem, but we have extremely different experiences on 2CB, which I would like to talk about. We're running out of time, but so my experience on 2CB is that it makes me anxious and a little paranoid, and I have a constant influx of intrusive thoughts
On 2CB or gummies?
on gummies,
Yeah.
on cannabis.
Your cannabis.
Yeah. And this may be very, very important for people who struggle with cannabis in that way. My wife takes a gummy and she just checks out. She's like, it's like she's tripping. She has no negative thoughts, no intrusive thoughts. There's nothing negative. It's all absolutely sublime. She communicates with her ancestors. She revisits her childhood. It's like nothing I've ever experienced. But if I take some 2CB with a gummy, most of all of that negative kind of stuff I've described, it disappears. So if you're someone who responds to cannabis like that, who tends to be a little paranoid with intrusive thoughts, it can be a huge benefit. Like Sasha and Ann Shulgin, they did not like cannabis. They did not use cannabis. Sasha said it was a waste. There was nothing that he came back with that was of any interest or use. And Ann Shulgin said that it was extremely powerful. It was kind of like my wife. It was almost like a psychedelic, but it made her extremely anxious and paranoid. Now, maybe if she combined it with some 2CB, she would have found that experience to be very different. But we'll never know. I think that's about it. Anyway, we can entertain some questions, I think, or comments, or you can share some stuff if you want.
Yeah, great, Daniel. Thank you for that. I have a question. You've mentioned some things that you would recommend taking with 2CB. Are there any medications, pharmaceuticals that you shouldn't be taking with 2CB, where you might get a negative cross reaction or negative drug-drug interaction?
Nothing other than anything that is contraindicated for psychedelics in general. MAOI inhibitors, for instance. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yes, my understanding that it's a partial agonist to the serotonin 2A receptor, and that it doesn't hit CERT like MDMA does. And so, as far as I could find out, it doesn't increase serotonin in the synapse like MDMA does, and that's why you don't get that hangover that you do with MDMA.
Yeah, yeah. MDMA, you kind of pay a little price for it, but 2CB there's really nothing.
It's great. Other questions for Daniel? Yeah, Julie.
Yeah, so I have tried 2CB, and Dan, and Dan is a psychonaut. He's very good with substances. And I'm like Susie and his wife, I'm super sensitive to almost everything. Like I hate THC, but I haven't really experimented like he has with 2CB, but I have found it, other than LSD, the only, for me, the only substance that doesn't have any side effects. I don't have any side effects on 2CB at this point, nor have I had them on LSD. But everything else, I think, has always had a, like I would never want to do MDMA again because I can't handle the headache. But I really think one of the things, Dan, that you said that I didn't know is you've never had visions on any of your drugs other than 2CB?
I have, but
Okay.
they're rare.
Yeah.
I have, but they're rare. Yeah.
And one other question, have you guys done 2CB without THC and sex? So just 2CB?
Yeah. Yes. And
it's different.
Yes. It's like when you combine it, like there's a TCB high and there's a 2CB high. And when you mix them, it's different. It's not the same as either one. There's kind of a synergy that is unique.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's longer lasting than either of them on their own.
Is it the same effect when it's smoked as it is with a gummy?
I would say no. I would say the sex is definitely not the same, and the experience itself is not quite the same. It can be good. You know, I like to experiment, and I find it interesting to experiment, but it's different. And Shelley Wininger kind of confirmed the same thing. The real, the kind of like the premium experience is with an edible, a gummy.